Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Our first story on why it's better not to go to work if you have poison ivy. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Want me to pick up a shift despite my doctor's note? Sure. This happened about 15 years ago. I was working as a server in a chain restaurant during the summer while I was home from college. I'd gone to a party one night, gotten hammered, and wound up passing out near the bonfire in the brush by a tree line of this big field. I woke up the next morning feeling pretty rough and gradually saw large patches of poison ivy popping up all over my body. By the end of the day, it was absolutely horrendous, head to toe, and I realized I had slept in a patch of poison ivy. I could barely move. I went to the doctor, who put me on steroids and bed rest. I was scheduled to work the next day and called my supervisor to let him know that aside from not being able to move my limbs because of the awful swelling, itching, and pain, I looked awful and should not be serving food to customers. He was a jerk about it, asked me questions trying to poke holes in my story, then demanded a doctor's note. I called my doctor and had one sent to him. The note cleared me from work for at least a week. A few days later, I get a call from my manager. They're slammed on a busy weekend night and need me to come in. I remind him that I have a doctor's note. It hasn't been a week, and while I'm feeling better, I'm covered in oozing sores. He tells me, "You've had long enough. Come in now or you'll be fired." Fine. I put on shorts, my polo shirt with company logo, name tag, and apron, and head to the restaurant. I get to the hostess stand, and everyone around me stares at my skin with their jaws dropped. I tell the hostess I was called into work and would like to check with the manager about where my section will be. She tells me he's busy in the party room helping out with a very large group and that I probably shouldn't go in there. She offers to go get him and tries to get me to move to a more conspicuous place. No, I insisted. I was told I would be fired if I didn't come to work today. I walked straight back to the party room, tapped my manager on the shoulder, and cheerily said, "Hi, manager, I'm here for my shift. How can I help?" His eyes opened wide in horror, and he told me immediately to go back home. I loudly protested that I was feeling better, that my sores weren't that bad, and I was worried about being fired, like he told me on the phone. He told me to go home, which I did. This was not the first incident where the manager was an absolute jerk, and I called to quit the morning of the next legitimate shift I was scheduled for after the poison ivy cleared up. And our second story. You're a cog, know your place, and only do what you're told. Okay. Various things happened at the company I worked with. I won't go into much detail, but I was building towards an exit, a difficult position to replace. I asked to transfer out twice as I do not plan to stay on in this capacity into our winter period. Essentially gave them 6 months' notice. At 3 months in, I suggested training a replacement. When I was hired, my department didn't exist, so there was little to no training. I basically built it from the ground up and learned as I went, trial by fire. I liked the company, wanted my replacement trained for a smooth transition after I left. Management was furious at the notion of my suggestion and told me to leave management to management and basically know my place. So that's what I did. Kept my head down, did my work, quietly removing any and all personal post-it notes I had tacked up around the office over the following weeks. Because much of my work was unsupervised, no one even knew these notes existed. If they didn't want me to train my replacement, I wasn't going to leave my materials behind as a guide. Put my 2 weeks in and was out before first snowfall. Coworker told me it was nearly 4 months before they found a replacement. And our last story. Refused to pay $60 to fix my roof? Okay, I'll close your building site down and cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. Characters in this story. My friend, who I'll call Brian, bullying Demolition man we'll call Keith, greedy property developer we'll call Karen, and the insurance assessor. Brian's neighbor is a typical greedy career landlord that left their rental house in disrepair. The poor tenant was living in the cold house, raw sewage leaking onto the lawn, and holes in the house that you could see light coming out of the house. After multiple requests from Brian, Karen refused to get any repairs done. When the state government introduced new laws about ensuring landlords are insulating their rental properties, and instead of doing this to the house, Karen kicked their tenant out and left the house vacant for 5 years. The old house deteriorated so much more during this time, with rats infesting the house and invading other houses nearby. Brian and his wife, with their limited funds, were able to get sufficient lending from the bank and offered to buy the house and do it up themselves to improve the neighborhood or rent it out, as there is a massive shortage of rental properties in our local county. Greedy Karen did not want to sell, nor did she want to spend a cent on the house to remedy the rodent problem. She also did not care about the effect the house was having on aesthetics of the street. It's important to know that Karen and her wealthy family have over 100 rental properties, and due to lax tax laws in this region, they do not pay a cent and can get tax write-offs when their properties deteriorate, then can claim on this as a loss. Long story short, some of them appear to be leeches on our society and are one of the reasons property prices are so high and rent prices are skyrocketing in our area. Her husband is also the chairman of the state's Landlord Association, an association that he often fronts the media for, defending landlords and putting a good media spin on them when there is negative press. Fast forward 5 years, and Brian finds out the house is going to be demolished to make way for some new houses to go in on the small section. That's good news, at least, though Brian and his wife were anxious about how smoothly the demolition would go due to the fact the houses are quite close to each other. This is important for later. Prior to demolition, the company doing it had to get samples from all sides of the house to check for asbestos. Either Karen made it difficult for the company to get down the side bordering Brian's house, or they simply were too lazy, but only samples from the 3 sides, not 4, were taken. Demolition day came around, and Brian was concerned that no safety barriers had been put up to protect his house from falling bricks of the chimney, nor was there anything from stopping dust and debris going all over his new deck and porch area. Later that day, Brian had the pleasure of meeting Keith. Keith is the demolition company manager that's well known around the district for only caring about money and has little regard for people or property. Keith was doing the demolition himself today, simply with a digger. Brian returned home during his break at work to check the progress of the demolition and found the demolition was already complete. After only an hour or so, the demolished house was in a pile. He climbed up on his roof and, to his disbelief, found hundreds of bricks had fallen onto his roof, causing damage, though he was lucky none had fallen through into the house. Brian phoned up demolition man Keith to ask about what went wrong. Keith initially downplayed the damage, despite there being 200 bricks laying on Brian's roof. Even with the damage done, no apology, and the rude attitude of Keith, Brian kept his cool. Since I did a little bit of roofing when I was younger, I can fix the roof if you just give me 4 new sheets of roofing iron and we'll call it even. Don't worry about paying for paint. I can sort that out when I paint the whole roof after the fall. Brian's roof was not in the best of shape, but it was in much worse shape after having bricks dumped on it, leaving massive dents and chipping the paint. This is the moment that a simple decision on Keith's part would screw him and the landlord big time. Not happening, pal. Your roof is effed anyway. I'll give you a sheet of secondhand roofing iron from my yard to repair the damage on the roof, and I can come and hose off the dust off your deck and dog kennel. Cue the revenge. The revenge was not intentionally nuclear, but Brian had a dilemma that his roof was damaged and he needed it repaired. There was rain and snow forecast later in the week, and he shouldn't be out of pocket having to buy new materials to fix his own roof up to a good standard. Brian is normally a calm and relaxed man, but this situation and the way he and his property were treated sparked an anger that I have never seen before. Brian got in contact with his insurance company, and due to the issue involving a roof, a building assessor arrived that day to assess the claim. The assessor would then be able to seek damages from the landlord or demolition company if he found them to be at fault. Brian also reported the demolition company to the local health and safety authorities due to their lack of safety precautions used when doing the demolition. The assessor got on the roof with Brian and was mortified to hear how Keith had acted in such disregard with the damage done to the roof, and his lack of an apology for any wrongdoing got the assessor mad. He then looked more concerned and bent down and picked up some gray fibrous material. Luckily, thanks to COVID, we already have masks on. Brian, this here looks like it's asbestos. I don't know how they got the sign-off to get this house knocked down in this manner. You don't know at the time of being exposed to this stuff, but if you breathe in these fibers, it can cause serious diseases later on in life, including lung cancer. I'll get this sent off to the lab for testing, and we'll be in touch. Fast forward another day, and Brian was contacted by his insurance company. It turns out the side of the house that wasn't tested was clad in asbestos. Not just any bad asbestos, the worst possible type you can get. Insurance will be seeking damages to replace Brian's whole roof, not just the damaged part. The cost of replacement is likely to be around $20,000. This is the cheap part. The demolition site has now been shut down by local authorities, and there needs to be a massive decontamination of the area. This involves having to remove at least half a meter of topsoil on the surrounding properties, test the soil, and remove more if there's asbestos still found. Areas with decks need to potentially have these removed so soil can be evacuated out underneath. The cost for this cleanup will likely be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, but who will pay for this is unknown at this stage, whether it's Keith or Karen's insurance or them personally. Time will tell. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.